Hey, welcome back to English Echo Daily, the podcast where you practice real English and think about real life at the same time. Today's topic is one that I think almost everyone struggles with, even people who would never admit it. We're talking about what other people think of you and why it has so much power over your decisions, your behavior, and honestly, your entire life.
And before we go any further, question for the comments right now. Be honest, is there something you've stopped yourself from doing because you were afraid of what someone would think? A dream you kept quiet, a change you delayed, something you wanted to say but didn't? Tell us below. No judgment. We've all been there.
Okay, so let's just name something right away because I think it's important. Caring about what other people think is not a weakness. It is not a flaw. It is one of the most deeply human things that exists. And anyone who tells you, I don't care what anyone thinks, I'm a little skeptical of that, honestly.
Same, because we are social creatures. We evolved in groups. For most of human history, being accepted by your community wasn't a nice to have, it was survival. If the group rejected you, you didn't eat, you didn't have protection, you didn't make it.
So, the brain developed an incredibly sensitive system for tracking how others perceive you. It's always running in the background, reading the room, checking for signs of approval or disapproval.
And that system isn't a bug. In the right amounts, caring about others' perceptions helps us be considerate, cooperative, socially intelligent. It helps us maintain relationships. It makes us better people to be around. The problem isn't caring at all. The problem is when that system gets turned up too high, when it starts running your life. When the fear of judgment becomes the primary filter through which you make every single decision.
And I think for a lot of people, that's exactly what's happening, not consciously. They're not sitting there thinking, I won't do this because of what people think. It's more subtle than that. It shows up as hesitation, as constant second guessing, as editing yourself before you even open your mouth, as choosing the safe option, the expected option, the one that won't attract criticism.
And over time, if that's the filter you're running everything through, you end up living a life that's been designed by other people's comfort. Not your own choices, not your own values, but a careful, curated version of yourself that was built to avoid disapproval. And that version of you might be very likable, but it might also feel completely hollow from the inside.
Hollow. That's exactly the word. Because the approval you get for being who others want you to be never actually satisfies you. You can collect compliments, validation, likes, people telling you you're wonderful, and still feel this emptiness, this sense that nobody actually knows you. Because they don't. They know the performance, not the person.
And I think this is one of the most painful things about living for others' approval. It's a moving target. It's never enough because it was never about feeling a genuine need. It was about managing fear. And fear doesn't get smaller when you feed it. It gets bigger.
So let's talk about where this comes from, because I don't think people are born afraid of judgment. Children are remarkably unself-conscious. They sing at the top of their lungs in public. They wear ridiculous outfits with total confidence. They say exactly what they think. And then somewhere along the way, that changes. Something happens. Usually, it's a series of small experiences that teach you that expressing yourself fully has consequences. You said something honest and got laughed at. You tried something creative and someone criticized it. You were different in some way and it made you a target. You showed excitement about something and someone made you feel silly for it. And you learned, protect yourself, edit yourself, be careful.
And those lessons make complete sense in the moment they're learned. They're adoptive. But then you carry them into adulthood, into situations where they no longer apply, and they keep running. The kid who got laughed at for having a weird idea becomes the adult who never shares ideas in meetings. The teenager who was mocked for their clothes becomes the adult who spends 2 hours deciding what to wear to a casual dinner. The mechanism is the same. The context has completely changed.
So, the first thing I want to say about how to actually change this is understand that most people are not thinking about you as much as you think they are.
There's a concept in psychology called the spotlight effect, the idea that we vastly overestimate how much attention others are paying to us. We think we're under a spotlight, but everyone else is also standing under their own spotlight, completely absorbed in what people think of them.
It's almost funny when you think about it. You're terrified of what they think, and they're terrified of what you think, and everyone is performing for an audience that is mostly not watching. The audience is busy worrying about their own performance.
And I think just genuinely internalizing that, not as a nice idea, but as something you actually feel, can be enormously liberating. Most people are not tracking your choices. They're not keeping score of your failures. They're not waiting for you to mess up. They're just living their own lives, consumed by their own concerns, and you pass through their thoughts far more briefly than your brain is telling you.
The second thing, and this one is a little more uncomfortable, is to get honest about whose opinion you're actually afraid of. Because it's rarely people in the abstract. It's usually specific people: a parent, a sibling, an old friend, a boss, someone whose approval you've been chasing for a long time. And often the fear of their judgment is completely disproportionate to the actual power they have over your life.
Right, like you're making a major life decision, whether to change careers, whether to move, whether to start something new, and running it through the filter of what someone who doesn't even live with you, who isn't paying your bills, who won't be affected by your choice at all, might think. And their imagined reaction is controlling your actual real life.
And sometimes when you look at it that clearly, it starts to lose power. Not always. Sometimes the relationship is complicated and the fear is deeply rooted. But sometimes you realize, wait, why am I giving this person this much authority over my choices? Did I consciously decide to do that? Or did it just happen and I've never questioned it?
Which leads to a question I think is really worth sitting with. If you knew, absolutely knew, that no one would ever find out what you chose, what would you do differently? If there were zero social consequences, zero judgment, zero possibility of anyone's opinion affecting you, what would change? What would you start? What would you stop? Who would you actually be?
That gap between how you'd live with no audience and how you actually live, that gap is the cost of living for approval. And for some people, it's small. For others, it's enormous. An entire career chosen to impress someone, an entire personality shaped around being acceptable, a whole life lived at a fraction of its actual voltage.
And here's the paradox that I find so interesting. The people we tend to admire most, the ones we find magnetic, compelling, genuinely interesting, are almost always people who seem free of that need for approval. Not because they're arrogant or don't care about others, but because they have a strong enough internal compass that they don't need constant external validation to feel okay about who they are.
And that internal compass, that's what we're really talking about building. Not a thicker skin, not caring, but a stronger relationship with your own values, your own sense of what matters, your own judgment about your own life. So that when someone disapproves or criticizes or judges, it registers. Maybe it stings a little, but it doesn't collapse you. Because you have something solid inside that the opinion can bump into without breaking.
And that thing gets built the same way every other internal resource gets built, through practice, through small acts of self-expression where you let yourself be seen, genuinely seen, not the curated version, and you survive it. Through saying the honest thing and watching the world not end, through making the unconventional choice and discovering that most people either don't notice or don't care as much as you feared.
If this conversation is landing for you, if you're nodding along and thinking about your own life, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it genuinely helps us reach more people who need this kind of content. Thank you.
And I want to name one more thing before we wrap up, because I think it's the piece that often gets left out of this conversation. And that's the difference between feedback and judgment. Because stop caring what people think can sound like ignore all input, never take anything on board, be completely closed to criticism. And that's not what we're saying at all.
There's a version of caring what people think that's actually healthy and useful. Someone who knows you well, who wants good things for you, who has relevant experience. Their perspective is worth considering. That's not judgment to defend against, that's information to factor in. The skill is learning to tell the difference between those two things.
Judgment says, you are wrong, you are bad, you should be different. Feedback says, here's something worth considering, and you get to decide how much weight to give it. You are not obligated to accept everyone's opinion of you as truth, especially the opinions of people who don't know you, who aren't invested in your well-being, who are projecting their own fears and limitations onto your choices.
Because here's something that almost nobody tells you about criticism. A lot of the time when someone judges your choices harshly, it has almost nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the choices they didn't make, the risks they didn't take, the life they didn't build. And seeing you try, especially seeing you try and succeed, can trigger something uncomfortable in them. And judgment is how that discomfort comes out.
So the next time someone responds to your growth with criticism or skepticism, it's worth pausing before you internalize it. Ask yourself, is this person speaking from wisdom and care or from their own unexamined fear? Because you deserve to be very selective about which voices you let shape your story.
Build your life from the inside out, not from the outside in. What you value, what you want, what actually matters to you when nobody is watching and there's nothing to perform. That's the real you. And that version of you, uncurated, genuine, a little imperfect, is almost certainly far more interesting than the careful performance you've been running.
And probably a lot more free.
Definitely a lot more free.
Okay, before we go, subscribe to English Echo Daily if you haven't yet. A brand new episode every single day, always in real, natural English, always about something that actually matters in your life.
And the final question for the comments today. Whose opinion do you give too much power to, and why do you think that is? Be honest with yourself. Write it down. You don't have to share it if you don't want to, but the act of naming it matters.
See you tomorrow.
Take care. Bye.